Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's presentation, Plant Poison. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I realize it's a beautiful day outside, and maybe we'll just have enough time to wrap this up and go outside and not be poisoned by plants after spending some time together this afternoon. And thanks as well to our Julia, who runs these programs weekly for the public and does such a great job of organizing and running and keeping things moving along. Thanks a lot to Julia. Today, please do take advantage of the Q&A, which is question and answer function on your toolbar to submit your questions. We're not going to be using the chat today for any back and forth, only to hand you any pertinent information kind of behind the scenes. But for y'all, the question and answer is open. At the end, we'll collect up all the questions that we don't answer along the way. Hey, and maybe I'm just going to be so thorough that you won't have any questions at all. Doubtful. My name is James, and I work for the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences here in Pinellas County. If you're not familiar with the Extension Service, we are an extension of the University of Florida, and we teach people things. We teach people things that are important in their lives, and we're a cooperative with our local government, Pinellas County, and the information that we try our best to provide to the citizens of this county allows the citizens who receive the information a great quality of life that doesn't create problems or expenses for the county. So that's the cooperative bit. Today we're coming to you from Brooker Creek Preserve. If you haven't been to Brooker Creek Preserve in Pinellas County, we're just shy of 9,000 acres of undeveloped upland and freshwater wetland habitat in the north of the county. So come and see what Pinellas County looked like before all the development. Wonderful plant communities up here, the upland plant communities with the oaks and the palmettos and all that, and the wetlands with the swamp trees and shrubs and all the flowering plants and everything. Mixed in throughout, of course, are a certain number of poisonous plants, and poisonous plants have come up as a subject of interest throughout the years of various educators presenting on a variety of subjects. Poisonous plants has always seemed to come along, so we thought we'd devote an entire program to examining this whole concept of poisonous plants. Let's start first from the plant's point of view, from the plant's perspective. Why are plants poisonous to begin with? Is it just mean, cruelty, some kind of animosity towards people? No. How do we know plants are poisonous? Is there a committee of plant testers? No. And then we'll wrap up with some plants that you will find in the wild, both native and naturalized, and some that are actually invasive that can cause harm if they are encountered in any particular way. So that's how we're going to break up today. I hope that suits. And like I said, we'll get you through so you can enjoy some of this beautiful afternoon. So let's start. Why are plants poisonous? Well, think about it. Plants are stuck where they are. They're rooted, most are rooted into the ground. There's no escape. They are vulnerable, and therefore they need some sort of defense against being attacked or eaten. Plants just want to be left alone. And since they can't run and hide or fly, plants need to defend themselves and defend their spot on Earth just as they are. They just want to grow and reproduce and get on with things without the hassle of being attacked, eaten, and so forth. How did we get here with these plants defending themselves? Well, let's look way, way back in time when plants first came out of the primordial waters and began to colonize land. All this free real estate, plants had been existing as aquatics forever, but then there was all this uncharted, literally, territory, and plants began to develop defenses against drying out, and they then became fully adapted to living on land and began to diversify. That's great. Suddenly we have dry lands on Earth covered in plants. Well, there was already another kingdom of life that had already hopped up on land, and that would be the bacteria. And the bacteria saw the plants coming and thought, resource. And so bacteria began to change into various types that could actually attack and feed off of this new plant material. And things like the bacterial wilt diseases of plants came around. Also, not long after plants, here come the fungus. And the fungus is another kingdom of life. So we've got the plants trying to stake their claim. The bacteria kingdom is already there. Now we've got the fungus kingdom coming up and saying, I need something to eat too. Here's all this resource. The fungi were tired of having nothing but bacteria to eat. So they started to work on the plants. And so plants now had to develop defenses against the bacteria, began to produce defenses against this fungus kingdom. The fungus basically secretes digestive enzymes and slurps in everything around it. So the plants had to adapt to that. More insult to these injuries. Here come the insects up out of the water. And the insects wasted no time in figuring out how to make meals out of these plants that had hopped up on the land and gotten themselves established. Here come the insects. And the insects then spent millions of years adapting to plants, and the plants started their defensive trials to prevent this new assault from this new group of organisms, the animals. Animals continued along their evolutionary path, and of course, we ended up with the vertebrates and the classic herbivores, the plant eaters, the four-legged plant eaters. 300 million years ago, plants are now having to deal with these giants with the giant mouths that can take all this biomass in one bite. So now plants are having to defend themselves against bacteria, fungus, insects, vertebrates. All these things are happening, and it continues to happen. We have representatives of groups of animals that have been around since the dinosaurs that are still with us today, still eating plants. Plants are still developing defenses against these assaults. Anything that helps an individual plant survive and reproduce, that trait is going to be maintained. And in the meantime, the herbivores are going to keep taking advantage of this bountiful biomass that the plants are creating. We even have, the ruminants. These are also, left over from the mists of time. We still have these four-legged ruminant mammals. Here we have a fawn just outside one of our offices here who not only has eaten the plants, but has gone to sit in the shade and chew them up again. Plants are by nature very, very fibrous. And just as the plants are having to adapt to the assault of the herbivores have had to modify their own bodies to process this very tough, indigestible, insoluble plant material. So animals like the unguiculates, like the deer here, they have to chew their food several times. They actually have to bring it back up out of one of their stomachs, re-chew it, try and get some nutrient out of it, and send it back along the digestive way. So it's back and forth. Plants and their defenses, and animals and their adaptations to deal with the defenses and the simple nature of the plants. Very recently, only 2.5 million years ago, we showed up. And we, with our giant brains and our need for sustenance and our innate curiosity and our ability to remember, most of us, could then sample the outside world and make this more or less collective memory on those plants that we derive benefit from in the form of nutrition, and those plants probably best avoided simply through trial and unfortunate error. So let's look at some of the plant defenses in general. Plants have to defend themselves, and they can by mechanical means. Plants, in this case, this is a lupin, a little perennial wildflower, flowers in late spring. It's a member of the legume family of plants, beautiful blue spikes of flowers. But when its leaves are small and young and tender, they're covered in these woolly hairs. And the woolly hairs don't prevent being eaten. They're still certainly predated upon, but they at least slow things down. These thick woolly hairs, you can see them very well represented on this newly growing, newly unfurling leaf here. They're just fuzzy enough to perhaps slow the progress of an herbivore. Now, when you're talking about something huge like a deer, they're just going to rip the whole thing off, and it's not going to help. But smaller scale, every little ounce, every little square centimeter of surface area to photosynthesize is sacred to these plants. They need every little bit to last as long as it can. So hairs, spines. Here we have the yucca. Yuccas are related to a familiar, popular garden plant called hostas, which are basically just really, 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 really soft yuccas. Yuccas, in this case, in these habitats where they grow, have these defensive, tough, fibrous, and spiky leaves, also to prevent predation. More mechanical are thorns. Many plants have thorns. If you look closely at this blackberry, it's even got thorns on the underside of the leaves. So this is really, really a plant. This is a plant that's really trying its best to mechanically prevent being eaten. And now we're getting close to our poison. We have plants that actually inject venom. Venomous plants. How about that? This is Tread Softly, a native wildflower. It's a relative of the Christmas poinsettia, which you might have heard is also poisonous. The Euphorbiaceae, the spurge family, this one doesn't rely on the fact that its leaves contain a toxin. Most herbivores don't get that far. If you look very closely at the glass-like hairs that cover the leaves, stems, even the calyces, everything but the flowers of this plant, those are spring-loaded little hypodermic needles that can inject an irritant into the skin, flesh of any unsuspecting mammal that would happen along. I am pretty sure that the animals like the gopher tortoise, they're immune to these attacks. I can't be sure about that. But what I am sure of through experience is that these little trigger hairs here can inject a very irritant toxin. So here is a plant that has figured out through evolution the ability to inject a poison into the face of something that's trying to eat it. Which brings us to today's topic of poison. It's the ability of plants to synthesize so many things. Being stuck still and having nothing else but photosynthesis to do gives plants plenty of time to synthesize all kinds of other things. And it's these defensive chemicals that we're going to look at very closely today, otherwise known as the poisons. And if you're not familiar, you should be with the plant in this slide, poison ivy. Probably everyone who speaks English, if you said poison ivy, they have heard of it. It's a plant to be avoided because this is a plant whose poison can be transferred onto our flesh, onto our skin to cause an irritant reaction, a chemical irritant reaction. So as I mentioned, plants are synthesizers. They have the ability to take environmental chemicals, break them into their component parts, and reassemble them into other compounds. They have the ability to absorb certain already made compounds out of the environment and kind of sequester them into certain areas and concentrate their availability or their presence in a particular area. Plants can move toxins around their bodies and concentrate the toxins into particular areas, like only making the leaves toxic, where the fruit might not be toxic, only making the stems toxic, and so on. So plants can not only synthesize, but they can compartmentalize, choose, and distribute toxins throughout their bodies. And the various chemicals that you're probably familiar with that are synthesized by plants include classes of chemicals like the alkaloids. And some of the alkaloids, some of these defensive chemicals you've heard of. Heard of caffeine? Defensive chemical. Nicotine? Defensive chemical. It's supposed to make you sick, and it does, and it's supposed to make you not want to consume this plant. Solanine and capsaicinoids. Solanine comes from the same root as somnambulous, sleepwalking. Solanines make you sleep forever. Capsaicinoids, that's what gives hot peppers their hot. That's supposed to turn you off. That's supposed to make you not want to eat this. Humans, with our large brains and large size and large capacity, and as we'll mention later, large livers, have somehow taken a liking to some of these defensive chemicals and have brought them into and actually, in some cases, crave these defensive chemicals like the nicotine and caffeine. Glycosides, a classic example of chemical, the glycoside group would be cyanide. I don't need to introduce cyanide. Just about everyone's heard of cyanide. Plants can make it. Tannins, you might be familiar with tannins. They give freshwater creeks and streams their brown color. They're usually released into the water when leaves are dropped and they float away. Tannin is what gives tea, black tea that we drink, iced tea, stains your teeth. That's tannin. That's a defensive chemical. That's supposed to make you sick and make you spit out the leaves. But again, humans seem to enjoy that sort of thing. Ricin is a protein. Perhaps you've heard of ricin. Has been used, unfortunately, in terrorist activity. It is such a potent toxin. Ricin is found in the castor bean. The rosary pea is a non-native vine that's loose and actually invasive that contains another deadly to people toxin, in this case called abrin. Oxalic acid and the oxalates, this is what makes starfruit a little bit dicey to eat. Does anybody get that kind of funny feeling when you're eating starfruit that something is not quite right? Or is that just me? The presence of the oxalic acid. Spinach is another example of a plant that has oxalic acid and oxalates in the leaves as a defense. These needle-shaped crystals. Does anybody get squeaky teeth when you eat spinach? That's it. That's a defense. That's the plant trying to keep its leaves from being eaten. But again, humans overcoming this actually crave some of these things. There's something called antivitamins, which we know vitamins are essential for certain metabolic processes, and a lot of us take supplemental vitamins because we might not get enough from our diet. Antivitamins are actually a class of bioactive compounds that do the reverse, that cause metabolic systems to break down and not work like they're supposed to. There's a couple of very, very, very early land plants, the horsetails, which is what's pictured here, and bracken, which is a fern, that contain these compounds. They're defensive. The volatile oils, of course, poison ivy. It's actually an oil that gets on your skin. It's waterproof, and it's slightly viscous, so you can actually rub that volatile oil around and spread it, and its irritant capabilities can then be spread. Coumarins, in various plant groups that cause a light sensitivity to light. So if you get these things on your skin in the presence of light, you'll wish you hadn't brushed up against these plants. And this is found in citrus peel. Have you ever had citrus peel, orange peel on your hands and gone out in the sun? It causes this reaction. It is a defensive chemical that prevents this plant from being attacked. And finally, the lectins, which is a group of compounds found in beans. Of course, beans are seeds of bean plants. Plants do not want their seeds to be eaten, chewed up, ground up, and swallowed. That means that seed's never going to germinate. Plants put a lot of effort into making their seeds toxic, because if anything eats the seeds of a particular plant and has a deleterious effect, the chances of that individual doing it again are near zero. Beans have a thing that makes you sick to your stomach, and I think y'all know what I'm on about. It's there for a reason. It's supposed to make you not want to eat beans. But again, as humans, we put that aside and we have selected these things for our gastro pleasure. So that's just a sampling of the kinds of chemical compounds that plants throw into all parts of their bodies and seeds and fruits and leaves and stems and roots and everywhere, trying to prevent from being consumed. If we go back then to these large herbivores eating tons and tons of these plants, the plants are evolving along with these animals and producing all of these defensive chemicals. How are the animals dealing with these onslaughts? Well, here's a dinosaur, and the herbivorous dinosaurs had these great big stomachs where fermentation could take place, digesting these very difficult to digest plant tissues could take place. Also, the toxins could be processed, and the modern day dinosaurs, the dinosaurs that survived the comet or asteroid impact that wiped out all the non-avian dinosaurs, the dinosaurs that are still around today still have and have maintained the characteristics common to other vertebrate species, mammal included. The number one defense against plants' defensive chemicals, and that is the liver. Poor old liver has become a major organ to combat and try and keep up with plant defensive chemicals and filter them out, and if not eliminate, then reduce the effect of the ingestion of these toxic compounds. I did mention the existent dinosaurs, the birds. Here we have one of our native, it's looking something like a warbler to me with the wing bars. Anyway, what this bird is eating is a native pepper. It's called the bird pepper, aptly named, and it makes these small fruit that are very, very, very highly concentrated with capsaicin. Remember the defensive chemical capsaicin that gives the peppers their heat? That is meant to prevent the fruit from being chewed up, because inside, if the seeds get chewed up, if you'll remember, if the seeds get chewed up, they're not going to germinate. Birds can't taste capsaicin. Birds are not affected by capsaicin. Birds are welcomed to eat the bird peppers because these birds don't chew. They're not going to chew up and destroy the seeds. The seeds are going to remain intact throughout this bird's digestive tract and be pooped out fully intact, far away from the parent plant, complete with a little lump of manure, fertilizer, to grow into a plant somewhere else. So the animal, in this case the bird, is getting the benefit of being able to eat this fruit without a deleterious effect, and the plant is getting the benefit of having its seeds moved to some other part of the landscape. So certain plant defenses are compartmentalized to prevent those parts, in this case the fruit, from being eaten by the wrong thing. So the right thing to eat these fruits is a bird. Birds are welcomed. Birds are quite happy. Birds are not affected by the otherwise defensive chemical. Humans, as we mentioned before, we do have early warning systems. for tasting something that might be poisonous, toxic. It's not just eat it and get him to eat it and see what happens, and then we'll write that down on the cave wall and remember not to eat that again. We have a little bit more of a sophisticated mechanism than that. We have the ability to taste bitter, and most toxins have that bitter taste, and we have that taste receptor to warn us and to encourage us to stop with the bitter stuff. That's brainstem. That's old. That goes way back in humankind. Of course, modern humans, us today, now we crave bitter things like roasted, brewed coffee. I love coffee. We're not supposed to. That bitter is supposed to give us a signal that says, don't carry on with this. This has caffeine in it. We really need to spit this out. Caffeine's going to make us nuts. Oh well, we seem to like it now. Giving guided hikes here at Brooker Creek. Of course, being plant-centered, you get to hear a lot about plants when you come here and take a guided hike. And fingers crossed we'll be doing that again someday. A question very, very often comes up when we indicate this plant or that plant or this plant or that plant. It's interesting, oftentimes it comes up, is it edible? Is that edible? And as we walk around through the oak hammocks, and this is the flatwood path, it seems like every time, well, not every single time, but this is a very common question: is it edible? And that's obviously, I think I said brainstem once before, it's innate human curiosity. Even though we've got all the food we need at our fingertips, still looking, still wondering. We're that eternal infant. Can I eat that? If it fits, I'm going to eat it. Is it edible? I'm going to ask someone who might have tried it first, and maybe if they got sick, I won't get sick, so I'm going to ask. So this is a question that comes up quite often, especially when we mention a botanical word, a botanical term, 100% botanical, that has worked its way into the vernacular and has worked its way into our vocabulary of nutrition. So this is a word borrowed from botany that now exists in nutrition, and that word is fruit. Flowering plants, all flowering plants, if it makes a flower, it makes a fruit. That is the deal. When you take plant identification, we talk about all the different kinds of fruits. Not all fruits are juicy and sweet. Some fruits are dry and they crack open. Seed pods, poppy pods, all kinds of different fruits. Technically, a fruit is the result of a pollinated flower, and a fruit has got the seeds in it. That's the botanical definition of fruit. The nutritional definition of fruit is much more woolly. Like a banana doesn't have any seeds in it, but it's still a fruit. A ripened ovary with seeds inside botanically is a fruit. And here is the fruit of the beauty berry. It's beautiful, it's a berry. Is it edible? Meh. Maybe. Maybe. It's certainly edible for something. This plant has produced its seeds inside a container that is rich in carbohydrate. It's a reward for a bird to, again, ingest, let the seed that's inside pass through its digestive system and exit the other end when the animal releases its waste. Should humans gorge on these? Maybe not. The same with the holly berries. Yes, they're fruit. They are the result of a fertilized pollinated flower, and the ovary has ripened, the seeds have developed inside. The holly berry is a fruit, it's got seeds inside, it's meant to reproduce the plant. Is it edible? Yes, to something. But I think if the beauty berries and if the holly berries and if the wild coffee berries, if they were really edible, nutritious, tasty, somebody would be making an awful lot of money growing and selling them. That's what I think. I mean, it's very unlikely that we're going to face a famine where we will need to exist on wild things. But again, this goes back to the innate curiosity that humans have about, is something edible? You never know. You never know when that famine's going to come along. Of course, we do have native wild grapes, true grapes. This is what the grapes look like that are native. What humans have done to those fruits that can be eaten and are delicious and are full of sugar is we've taken them into cultivation and we have exaggerated them well beyond their wild counterparts until the creations that we have made. And we invite you to watch Kitchen Botany for more on this. This is our tiny little wild grape. And yes, it has a nice flavor. It has a grapey flavor. Skin is kind of bitter, but we could feasibly eat these, not chew up the seed, plant the seed somewhere else. The seeds, as I did mention before, inside are other sources of plant defensive chemicals and plant poisons, and lots of the same toxins and more can be found sequestered into the seeds of many plants. Those are the reproductive structures of the plants. Those cannot be destroyed. If a seed is destroyed, the plant's not going to grow. Again, with the humans, taking these defensive chemicals and taking a liking to them. So we have this group of things called spices, and many spices are ground up seeds. And the characteristics of the spice are very often those defensive chemicals. Herbs as well. Many of the compounds that are found in the leaves of many plants that we find aromatic and even flavorful are just defensive chemicals. But these are the ones that in small doses don't seem to affect us. And in fact, in the right doses, make us feel great. You know, the addition of pepper and cloves and cinnamon to things, it's quite nice. Another seed that doesn't want to be eaten would be the seeds of the grasses, the grains. Grains, of course, have, many grains have a protein called gluten. And even in recent years, people are beginning to express an intolerance to that protein. Well, that's not an accident. Early humans had to be very careful with eating grains and the amount until selections were made and these plants were brought into cultivation and the offensive chemicals were bred out. Still, the traces of the chemicals that are in some of these plants can still make some people not feel so hot. Again, if you want more on spices and the spice chemicals and the history of some of our spices, we do have a recording on our YouTube channel, Pinellas Extension, called Spice Science. And that's, look, It's over an hour of spices. So enough of that for today. Here we have a bowl full of poisonous plants. And again, we have a bowl full of highly nutritious plants. So how can we have poisonous, nutritious plants? Well, that again brings in the whole idea of cultivation and taking the majority of the defensive chemicals out. We have plants like lettuce. Wild lettuce, you wouldn't go near it with a 10-foot pole. Wild lettuce is full of a bitter latex that not only makes it unpalatable to insects, humans certainly wouldn't want to eat it, but it became a part of our famine food and became cultivated, and eventually those toxic latexes were bred out. Another member of our toxic stew here is the tomato. Of course, they belong to that group of vegetables, the solanaceous vegetables. Remember, solanum means go to sleep forever, and many parts of the solanaceous plant body is full of defensive chemicals. Its fruit, only a tiny bit, because its fruit does want to be eaten and passed along. I think we mentioned spinach before with its oxalic acids, all these defensive chemicals. For more on what we've done to create these vegetables and to eliminate their defensive chemicals and to turn them into things that could never exist in the wild, we invite you to tune into Kitchen Botany. Some of our best information about plants and their deleterious side effects, unfortunately, has come from the domestication of herbivorous animals. And through observation, humans have taken quite a lot of notes and notations on the effects of certain vegetation to animals and have, by extrapolation, avoided these plants. Modern day farmers need to be aware of plants that pose a particular threat to livestock, because we have created, again, we've created, just like with the vegetables, we've created organisms that can't survive in the wild. They are now dependent on us, just like a cabbage is dependent on us for its survival. You can't plant a cabbage seed out in the wild and have a forest of cabbage. It couldn't happen. You couldn't turn a cow loose necessarily and have a sustainable living colony of cattle, because they'll eat stuff that kills them. And therefore, we have studies, scientific studies, on what plants to avoid presenting to your livestock, what plants to eliminate from pasture areas, because they're going to eat them and get sick. And that's a lot of money if your cow gets sick and, heaven forbid, doesn't make it. So here we have a compendium, I don't know if that's a word, of poisonous plants of the southern United States from a agricultural point of view. So is it edible? We checked this book for a lot of the plants that are not native and non-native that you might find throughout Pinellas County. And here are a few that you might come across that you might want to eliminate from your sphere of influence if you have the capacity to eat everything that grows outside. This is for your own protection. If you have livestock, which is not unheard of, here are, we certainly do have some small farms up here in the north of Pinellas County, and there's some here and there. If you have perhaps pets that like to nibble on this or that or the other thing, this is just an awareness on these naturalized plants that you could find growing in the wild, plants that might just germinate and start to grow in your yard area or any sphere of influence, school area, church area, anywhere. Learn these plants, understand that they do have the capacity to make mammals like us unwell. One is Johnson grass. This is a bad weed. It was actually introduced as a fodder crop, which went south very fast. It has the ability to produce cyanide, and in large quantities that can be deleterious. It takes eating a lot of Johnson grass to have that effect, but the fact that it is an established invasive plant that produces cyanide is one of many reasons that this plant is on the list for elimination where it grows. A native evergreen vine, very fragrant, very attractive, a lovely landscape plant, a lovely native landscape plant with these cheerful flowers. It's actually flowering right now. It's sold as a landscape plant in the native plant trade, but just be aware that this plant, if ingested, does have a compound called strychnine that would probably want to be avoided. If there is anyone or anything where you would put this plant that might have the propensity to eat it. The very showy, shiny black berries of pokeweed aren't necessarily highly toxic. Again, this would be a fantastic crop if these things were actually good and nutritious and easy to grow and so on. Someone will be making an awful lot of money because they're very prolific, but there's just no real benefit beyond surviving famine to eating the fruit of the pokeweed. The leaves themselves contain quite a large, high concentration of that oxalic acid, of those oxalates. I have eaten poke salad made from the new shoots of this plant. The new shoots were collected and boiled and drained and boiled again and drained. I'm not making this up. And boiled again and drained so that the majority of those toxins could be washed out. So now the plant would be edible, mixed with scrambled eggs. I mean, it was okay, but again, there's plenty of food available where you wouldn't necessarily have to go to all that just to make a plant non-toxic to mix with scrambled eggs. Jimson Weed, this one has alkaloids. It's a relative of the tobacco, the nicotine. It's a relative of the tomato with the solamines and the peppers with the capsaicin. So this is one of those alkaloid producing plants. This is an alkaloid that actually makes you nuts. It is a defensive chemical, but again, humans have found a way to take this defensive chemical and use it recreationally. I'm going to leave it there. Not recommended. A very popular butterfly garden plant is Lantana. Lantana strigochimera. It's had a name change, and it makes a lot of photosensitivity. It causes photosensitivity. In addition to the oxalic acid, it has a compound that has been named lantanin, which can cause that light reaction. If it's even ingested, it can cause, if you eat this thing, you can get a reaction to the sun. So again, this is a non-native, this is an invasive plant. This is a plant who does concentrate those defensive chemicals in the leaves and not in the fruit, so that the fruit is actually out there for anything who wants it to distribute the lantana. Unfortunately, this one has become quite an expensive problem to clean up in natural areas. might be aware of oleander as a toxic plant. When I was growing up, we were told, it was actually elementary school, we all learned what oleander was. I hope it wasn't just me. But anyway, we were told, you know, that this family went to Dunedin Causeway and there was oleander growing out there, and they cut the sticks off the oleander and they used them to roast their hot dogs, and they all died. That's probably not true, but what is true is that oleander does contain toxins, and it can cause a reaction if you get it on your skin. Some people have reported getting the sap of oleander on their skin and having a terrible reaction. Again, probably a phyto reaction to having the sap on their skin. So this is one that got a reputation even amongst the little kids, the oleander. A member of the legumes, Senna. Interesting, this genus Senna is the same genus that contributes certain extracts that are used in a product called Cinnacot. If you're familiar with Cinnacot, it is a I don't even know what you call it, laxative. That's what you call them. So here's a plant with strong laxative action. Now that might not necessarily be a defense. Maybe it has more to do with a rapid expulsion of the seeds of this plant by whatever eats them, so that they don't get digested and don't lose their viability. Food for thought. The Cinna bean pods are winged like this. This is the Cinna bean pods. They don't look like classical sweet peas, but they're put together the same as a sweet pea or a green bean or a black-eyed pea. They're a legume. The nightshade might be familiar as a poisonous plant, and this one you can see that this is related to the tomatoes, the eggplants, the peppers, and so on. You can see the familial resemblance there. This looks like a little green tomato or a very small and very round eggplant. It's related. The fruit, the leaves, the roots, the flowers, everything of this one are deadly poisonous to us, but not to whatever the distribution mechanism was when this plant evolved. There are plants that are still around today whose primary dispersal organism has become extinct. So it's very possible that Solanum species in Pinellas County, there might have been a bird that wouldn't die by eating its fruit that's now long gone, but the plant is still managing to reproduce itself just by chance. So that's another subject for another lecture, extinct dispersal mechanisms. You may have heard of hemlock. Hemlock, of course, the plant that did our Socrates in. This is a member of the carrot, fennel, Queen Anne's lace, parsley, that whole group. A very fragrant group of plants. They have all kind of defensive chemicals. The water hemlock actually has one that is so defensive it can cause death. So water hemlock, definitely one to recognize, appreciate, and remind whoever you still have the ability to influence. Please don't eat that. We mentioned ricin, an agent that's been used in terrorist attacks. Ricin is actually taken from this plant, the castor bean, whose genus is Ricinus. And it looks like a tick because the seeds, this is actually a photograph of the seeds in the upper left-hand corner here. They look like little ticks. So the castor bean, this is another one that has naturalized in Pinellas County. You can find this one often in freshwater ditches. It's got this very distinctive palmately lobed, very deeply lobed leaves, oftentimes with the red pigments in the stems and the leaves. Sometimes it's just green. It has these kind of alien-looking spiky seed pods, the fruit, but it's dry when it's ripe, and it releases these very shiny, very attractive, but tell your friend or person not to eat them, please. The tallow tree is another invasive exotic that was brought into cultivation because it had all the qualities that we wanted in a landscape plant: fast growing, symmetrical shape, quick source of shade. You could plant these tallow trees in parking lots. They could tolerate all kind of exposures, and they'd quickly grow into a shade tree. Unfortunately, they're now loose in the native areas. They're out competing our natives, and to add insult to injury, encountering their leaves through mowing, mulching, bagging their leaves, that kind of things, can expose humans and pets and children to the effects of the saponins, which they're soapy. They get on you, they're on you. They're like a slime almost. The wild poinsettia, yes, there is such a thing. Not as showy as the plant that has been brought into cultivation and exaggerated into the many forms that we have now, but this is one that's actually native here in Pinellas County, often encountered down by the coast. This is one that doesn't mind and actually thrives down by the coast in slightly salty areas. It's a euphorbia, a member of that spurge group. You might have heard that poinsettias, if you see your cat chewing on your poinsettia, get a new cat. No. If you see your cat chewing on your poinsettia, get it out of the way, if there is such a thing as out of the way of the cat, because these do produce a toxic, milky latex that is also a skin irritant. Milkweed, we perhaps have heard that the milkweed butterflies, like the monarch and the queen, the caterpillars of those species are toxic. They are poisonous if eaten by other animals, because they can concentrate the toxins from this plant into their body tissues without being affected by those poisons. So here we have not only an animal overcoming the plant's defense by becoming immune to it, but there's an animal that co-opted the plant's defense and took it on as its own, literally, by ingesting and incorporating a pre-made toxin from the host plant, the milkweed, and then using that as its own defense, both as the larval stage, the caterpillar, and even into adulthood. Even our poor little button bush produces toxins. I'm not kidding when I tell you that most plants have defensive chemicals. We're just kind of running through the ones that you're very likely to encounter on a walk through any park, preserve in Pinellas County. Plants have defensive chemicals. And in the face of the cephalanthus or the button bush, it has its own, the cephalin, and also glycosides. Another one of the photosensitizing, the ones that if you get it on your skin or if you ingest, it causes you to break out in the sun, is St. Johns Wort. St. Johns Wort, and here it's worth mentioning that a lot of these, many, I'm not going to say a lot, but many of these plant defensive chemicals, we have looked at caffeine and nicotine and capsaicin as plant defenses that we have actually taken on for pleasure the defenses against being predated upon, humans have turned on its end, and people get quite jolly and quite stuck to nicotine and get quite stuck to caffeine, even though it's a defensive chemical, and capsaicin. People actually crave the burning sensation. These toxins have also been used medicinally because, face it, think about it, medicine is poison for whatever it is that you want to kill. If it's a bacteria you want to kill, let's take a bactericide from a plant and use that. If there's a fungal infection you want to kill, we already mentioned that plants are expert antifungal factories. So let's take some that the plants have already. And then it kind of branches out from there into kind of the imagined, some of the imagined maladies, and a lot of prescription was being done to plants having qualities that didn't actually exist. So medicine has been hand in hand with plants and plants' defensive chemicals, and there are many medicines accepted, tested, FDA, the whole 9 yards, that are derived directly from, and if not inspired by, plant synthates. So plants are the original synthesizers, as it were. But St. Johns Wort has been used to treat ailments of the mind, even. So there's a prescription to this plant of having healing aspects for the mind. There's a poppy, a wild poppy, that also produces a toxin, an alkaloid, a milky sap, along the lines of its cousin, that produces a milky sap containing alkaloids, called morphine. Caffeine, morphine, these alkaloids that are produced in the case of our native Mexican poppy. This is an alkaloid that doesn't cause any kind of euphoric effect, but it does have a negative, a deleterious effect if ingested. And we'll finish up with the one plant that everybody knows, the poison ivy, and it even has its own volatile oil that it produces, and oils are expensive to produce, and so poison ivy produces these things and depends on the oil doing its trick and not losing much. Hopefully any organism that eats and becomes affected by poison ivy just won't do it again. And you very rarely see poison ivy that's been munched on, as it were. Those oils are, I'm not sure actually saying that, being present in the flowers. I would think that the insects with their hard exoskeletons would be outside the influence of any of the defensive chemicals if they were merely visiting the flowers, whereas insects that would be using their mouth parts might be affected or even gummed up by being chewed on by insects. The saying is leaves of three, leave it be. Technically, they're leaflets. Each leaf is divided into 3 smaller parts, but whatever it takes to recognize this plant. Of course, it's a growing vine. It has these 3 distinctive leaflets. It has tiny little white flowers produced right now. The effective chemical is also found in the fruit. Does not affect birds, so the birds can eat the fruit. The margins of the leaves often have lobes or waves or teeth. You can tell this is a single leaf. Again, if you take plant identification, we'll learn about how to tell a leaf from a leaf that's divided into leaflets, but here is the leaf coming off the main stem. And even in the winter, this is a distinctive plant. The very thick, clinging vines have these tiny little roots or side branches, little adventitious growths that help it to hang on. And yes, the oils are contained within the plant itself. So if you do get tangled up in this plant, even in the absence of the leaves, you may very well be affected by that irritating volatile oil. So as we're walking along in Brooker Creek, and we do hope you come and visit, and if you're walking with someone and they ask you, is that edible? You can say yes. I mean, everything is, isn't it? Once. But no. We encourage, when you do come to walk in any of our parks and preserves, that you just walk. Just walk, look, think, imagine the many ways that all of these wonderful plants could kill you. Imagine all the different mechanisms, all the different defensive chemicals that could be at work all around you in this beautiful tapestry of green. So we're going to get to questions. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. If you have any, now would be a great time to type them in. But first, Julie is going to launch a poll. I'm going to take a drink of water. We just have a couple of questions for you to answer for us, please. I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind just ticking the answer to some of these, as many of questions as you can. I'm going to mute.
Thanks so much for answering the poll, everyone. We'll leave it up for another 10 to 15 seconds, and then we'll get to questions.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for answering our poll questions. And now I'll get to some of your questions. Just before that, I do want to mention, as I did before, we have a YouTube channel. Look for Pinellas Extension. That's the IFAS Extension Services. We have playlists on the Brooker Creek Preserve playlist. We have all kind of wonderful things that have been brought to you so far, including Birds Through the Seasons, 500 million years of Brooker Creek, which was done by one of our wonderful volunteers. Fascinating leap through time. If you want to, if you just kind of happened upon us today and want to keep up with what we're up to, definitely follow the Brooker Creek Environmental Education Center on Facebook. And if there are any questions that you did not necessarily want to ask in front of everyone, if there's something that you need to let me know, or any questions that you have going forward once we're not live, please don't hesitate to drop me a line at this email address. So let's have a look at the questions. Are the toxins, okay, we have an oil-based toxin question, and yes, there are, poison ivy is not the only plant that has that volatile oil based toxin. Oil, like I did mention, is a very expensive thing to make for plants. It locks up some of the moisture, and it does take a lot to synthesize, but it is obviously very effective. A lot of the aromatic oils in herbs, especially in the mint family, the rosemary oil and the thyme oil and the marjoram oil, those are toxins, not necessarily for us, but thyme oil, in fact, has shown a very high antimicrobial. So here we have this plant that's creating this very effective antimicrobial oil that we then take and use as a flavor. So yes, it's not just poison ivy that's oil-based. Mike Jones would like to let us know that poison ivy only affects primates, which is news to me. That definitely is food for thought, that only us and all of our other few remaining primates that are still on the planet are affected by poison ivy. That's very good.
I think that was a question, James.
Did I know?
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Did I know that poison ivy only affects primates? I didn't. And if you're asking me if only primates, I don't know. But I think that we share that in common with our ape cousins. Are there any poisons that are used in non-flowering plants, such as moss or lichens? We did have a class on lichen just 2 weeks ago, and it was mentioned there that because fungus is a component of lichen, and because lichen are known to synthesize defensive chemicals that they use on each other, it definitely stands to reason that lichen contain defensive toxins as well that would very, very likely affect us if eaten. The thing about lichen, and we don't know much about the toxicity of a lot of lichen because it grows so slowly, no one's ever really, well, I'm not going to say no one's ever, but lichen isn't something that you can really get enough of to get a decent sample size to get sick enough on, because it just doesn't grow in enough abundance. So other non-flowering plants, we mentioned early on the horsetails and the bracken ferns. Those are some non-flowering plants that have these defensive chemicals. Other than that, the modern species of this group, the non-flowering plants, have evolved along with the fungus and the bacteria and the herbivores. So even though they have the characteristics, they represent those early land plants, today, yes, they are going to have, the defenses against the organisms that they have evolved alongside of. Non-flowering plants, and that's the best I can do with that question. I hope that suffices. Kept you a little bit longer than I had anticipated. I'm so glad you all stuck with us as long as you did. This next slide is going to be, we have a nice long March. We have 5 Wednesdays in March. So I hope that you can join us at least for a few of our upcoming classes. Again, if you want to sign up or like us on Facebook, you'll get alerts to the upcoming classes. Otherwise, I'll leave this up. And thank you again all very much for joining us today. It's always great to have you, and we'll hopefully see you in March. Thanks for joining us today.